fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I got another horror anthology for the month of October. And once again, this is one by Amicus Productions, 1967's Torture Garden. Which, one is a weird title, because there's not really torture or a garden. It's kind of like Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. There's no house. Which, this is actually Amicus' second anthology film after Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and again directed by Freddie Francis, who directed that, along with a number of Amicus films and Hammer. I mean, he directed Tales from the Crypt film, Tales That Witness Madness. For Hammer, he directed Dracula's Risen from the Grave, Evil of Frankenstein, Paranoiac, Hysteria. Directed a lot of horror films. And, well, it was released in November of 67 in the UK, September of 68 here in the States. And I'm not a fan of this cover either. I really like the cover artwork of a lot of films from the 60s and before. Like, I always... that would make a much better cover than these weird Photoshop Walmart covers. I would have to say this is probably the underrated gem of all Amicus anthologies. While House That Dripped Blood and Asylum have stories that I liked more than the ones in this, this one's probably the most consistent with quality of stories and wraparound. But it has what you can come to expect from Amicus at this point. Well, this is the second film, but it's one of the last ones that I'm seeing. Which, for a while, I've said I had all Amicus anthologies except for The Monster Club. I was actually mistaken. Monster Club was produced by Milton Subotsky of Amicus, but it's not actually an Amicus film. So I do have all the Amicus anthologies. So that's cool. So, yeah, it has a great cast, which, of course, you have Peter Cushing, who's been in all of their anthologies except for Vault of Horror, which is the only one I have left to get to. And then The Uncanny and Tales That Witness Madness that came later, which he's in The Uncanny at least. But you also have Jack Palance, Burgess Meredith, Beverly Adams, Barbara Ewing, who was also in Dracula's Risen from the Grave, also directed by Freddie Francis. And this one's kind of similar to Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, where it's a group of strangers in this sort of public area. Instead of a train, it's like a carnival. And you have this mysterious figure who you find out who he really is at the end. In this case, is Dr. Diablo, played by Burgess Meredith, which I think was a great choice because, you know, not only is he Penguin from the Adam West Batman show, but when I think of Twilight Zone actors, like ones that have been in Twilight Zone in more than one episode, I think Burgess Meredith is the essential Twilight Zone actor. He's been in 4 episodes. And actually, I'll save that for later, but so yeah, he's sort of our horror host that, you know, this group of patrons, they want something more out of this carnival sideshow. So he says, you know, for a few dollars more, I can show you a truly scary experience. So he brings them to this statue, this female effigy with these shears. If you look into the shears, there's like a thread in there, but if you look into the shears, you can see your fate. So that's kind of like the tarot cards from House of Horrors. You get 4 stories. The 5th story is incorporated with the wraparound. all the stories were written by psycho novelist Robert Bloch, who wrote the stories for Asylum, House That Dripped Blood, I think From Beyond the Grave. Maybe not Asylum, but definitely House That Dripped Blood, and I think From Beyond the Grave. And I really enjoyed this film. I liked all 4 stories, obviously some more than others. Some of them had a rather silly premise, but it handles itself very well. The one of which I actually thought felt like a Bava film, which is a huge compliment. First, I guess just some trivia. I guess originally it was supposed to have both Cushing and Lee, Christopher Lee. But it was put out through, was it Paramount? Columbia. Columbia, being an American company, they wanted at least 2 American leads in the film as well. And Burgess Meredith was already cast as Dr. Diablo. He was the only actor they wanted to play Diablo. So they ended up not casting Christopher Lee and getting Jack Palance, which is fine. It's always fun to see Jack Palance. I have to mention, just because if I don't, someone will in the comments be like, did you know? Yes, I do know. That he was Jack Nicholson's boss in Batman. The one that set him up to get killed and turned into the Joker instead. So, I mean, it's made on a budget of $500,000. It's a movie that looks great for $500,000. And this female deity that's playing this effigy statue is named Atropos, played by Cleety Jessup, which is a name I've never heard before. She was in the movie with Lee Remick. She was also in Nightmare, which is a Hammer film, and Torture Guard, which is Amicus. But the first story is called Enoch or Enoch. And this story actually reminded me of the first segment of the pilot movie, the pilot TV movie of Rod Serling's Night Gallery with Roddy McDowell. Because you have this greedy playboy played by Michael Bryant, who his uncle is dying, and he has some fortune that seems like he's not going to leave his nephew, but he wants it. And he doesn't really kill his uncle, but makes it so it happens. Like in Night Gallery, Roddy McDowell leaves the window open, and his uncle gets pneumonia. Here, his uncle's having what seems like a heart attack, and he won't give him the medicine. He keeps getting closer to it, he keeps knocking it away. Which, his uncle was played by Maurice Denham, who I swear I recognized. Maybe not. Okay, Paranoiac, which is a Hammer film. I'm pretty sure that one's with Peter Cushing. Hysteria, also Hammer. Guy's been in a lot of movies. Countess Dracula. He's been in a lot of stuff. So he dies, and he starts to see this cat, which I guess is a evil cat, that can cast spells. It's a man-eating cat. And it pretty much drives him crazy. At one point, he even kills this homeless guy. Or, I don't think he really said who he was. He's a homeless guy living in his barn, or he's like the handyman or whatever. He kills him with a pitchfork, which I've never seen a pitchfork with just 2 prongs on it. And he eventually gets caught, thrown in jail, and the ending is kind of silly, but I think it handles it well. Because when he sees the cat doesn't really do much of anything. We just have an extreme close-up of the cat's face. Which, first time I saw it, I thought of that shot on Inferno, Dario Argento's Inferno, when we see the yellow eyes. That was also on Suspiria. Almost like a painting, but up close. It reminded me of that shot for whatever reason. But, while he's in jail, the cat pretty much decapitates him, I guess eats his head. And it has that really thick, looks like tomato juice or paint blood that was used a lot in the 60s. I would say this is probably the lesser of the stories. The second story, Terror of Hollywood, is much slower. This one's a bit more to the point. But I like the premise and the twist to that one more than this. I mean, this one was still well told, well acted. I'm probably leaving a lot out, but that's the gist of it. And then at the end of every story, we see that Atropos snip whatever thread is in front of her with the shears. And Meredith goes on to the next patron. So this one is Terror over Hollywood, and this stars Beverly Adams, who, what else was she? How to Stuff a Wild Bikini. Okay, that's a movie she was in. I'm guessing she was kind of that's what I'm looking for, bombshell in the 60s, or sex symbol, I guess. Haven't seen anything else she's been in. But she's this very stardom-hungry actress in Hollywood who kind of willing to do anything to get to the top and have stardom. This reminded me of something else also. This reminded me of that episode of Tales from the Crypt where, I can't remember who's in it, but there's this actress, she can't catch a break, and there's this very big role that she wants, doesn't know much about it, and this other actress is also up for it. Well, she pretty much screws that actress over. She gets the role and then finds out it's some gory art exhibit where she's pretty much killed and kind of disemboweled in front of everyone as like an art exhibit. So it's like she was very ruthless and fought very hard to get that role. But it ended up, at what cost? This doesn't quite go in that direction, but her character reminded me of that. And she meets this one actor who has been like a leading man for like decades. Like, she looked up to him even when she was really young. And he's sort of like a suave, cool, I guess sort of like a Marlon Brando, but sort of like a Marlon Brando type actor, but looked at the same way as like James Dean. They hook up, she falls in love, and then this one's probably the most like a Twilight Zone episode. I feel like there has been a Twilight episode of this, But eventually she finds out that, just as she's really trying to climb her way to the top, she finds out that Hollywood is pretty much making people into androids. Or she finds out at least this guy is an android. There's some sort of scuffle or whatever. She scratches his face. And, like, yeah, the effect does look kind of cheap. Like, you can even tell it's like a mirror tape to look like shiny metal. And even the, like, latex used for the flaps of skin looks kind of fake. But I like it. At least it's practical. You find out that's why he's been a leading unaging man for so long. Because he's not human. He doesn't age. He's an android. And they eventually turn her into an android. And she becomes, top of the world actress. But, she loses her humanity. Obviously there's more to these stories than I'm explaining. But it's because I do recommend this film. And yes, I do know I'm spoiling it. I should say spoiler alert. But the way these stories are told, they do play more like a Tales from the Crypt, or actually more so Twilight Zone, Night Gallery. Plays more like a Rod Serling type film or type stories. But there are things that remind me of like Tales from the Crypt as well. The third story is probably my favorite, at least in how it's filmed. Because the third one is called, I keep forgetting the name, Mr. Steinway. Which is John Standing plays this very world popular pianist. And he has this grand Bechstein piano that he named Euterpe. And he has a new girlfriend named Barbara Ewing from Dracula Has Risen from the Grave. It's his new fiance, I think, and Euterpe is actually alive and gets really jealous of Barbara Ewing and takes revenge on her. This one kind of reminded me of Christine, but this one's a lot more subtle than Christine. Like, this one doesn't go over the top. Like, it doesn't have the lid of the piano. It's not like it's screaming, "Get out," with the lid or anything like that. There's one point where she goes to play it, and the lid of the keys shuts on her hands and almost breaks her fingers. There's a part where she's trying to knock on the door for him to let her in, but it's playing very loudly by itself. But he still hears her knocking. And eventually she starts to think the piano is alive, and the ending really handled itself well, because it could have been really cheesy. It could have been way over the top and cheesy. And it went for more subtlety, which I greatly appreciated. Because to show that the piano is alive and threatening and coming after you, she's alone in the apartment, and it's playing by itself the funeral march music. Da, 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 da. So it's this really foreboding, threatening sound. And this is the one, like, you get these really crazy, like, this one sticks out to me the most, at least as like how it's shot, because you get these like diagonal shots and like weird angles, and you have lights, like the windows, the lights from outside, there's like these pinks and purples. It feels like a Bava film. And of course the apartment's very dark, except for those lights. So you get really creative lighting and camera angles. Although, if it was a Bava film or an Italian film, I feel like it would be this really frantic, like, high keynotes playing. But, no, it's a funeral march, which is, I think, more subtle. I keep saying subtle, but that really is the route it goes. Even at the very end, where, it shows that the piano is very much alive and charges at her, knocks her out the window. Even then, it still feels subtle. Because again, it's not like the keys turn into teeth and it talks with its lid, or it doesn't get stupid. It plays it seriously. But I think this one had the most atmosphere to it, because even though it is in this sort of penthouse apartment, it still has this foreboding atmosphere, this sort of claustrophobic atmosphere. Because of the lighting, the camera angles, again, it feels like a Bava film, which is a huge compliment. And of course, her falling out the window looks like an accident. No one's gonna... People could come up with 1,000 theories of how she died. No one's gonna guess the piano pushed her. So then we get to the final self-contained story, because the final one is mixed in with the wraparound. But this one is called the Man Who Collected Poe. And this is one that has Jack Palance and Peter Cushing. So right there you got a great cast with just those two guys together. And they both do a great job. They're both super fans of Edgar Allan Poe. Very avid fans, collectors. And they happen to meet by chance, and Jack Palance wants to see Cushing's collection. He invites him over to see his collection, and he starts getting really jealous right off the bat. Everything he shows him is like, well, is that a first edition? Shows him it is. Like, well, is that really this? He shows him it is. And he keeps trying to buy it. Like, well, how much do you want for it? He says it's not for sale. So, well, how much? He says, still not for sale. And then he offers to show him his private collection. And keep in mind, Jack Palance is getting increasingly more jealous. So Cushing takes him to this private room, or this room with all his most sacred collections. It says how most of it he inherited from his father, who was also a Poe collector. It says that he even collected, the actual Poe. And Palance doesn't really get what he means, and he holds up an urn. He's like, oh, okay, so he's got Poe's remains, okay. But there's another room that Cushing keeps avoiding, and he won't bring Palance there. And just between the jealousy and the intrigue of that room, it just keeps building and building until eventually just Palance kills Cushing. Because he's jealous of everything that he has, and he has to see what's in that room. And when he goes in, he finds out, oh, well, Edgar Allan Poe is still alive, and he's kept in there. Because some of the stuff in the collections was, new works by Edgar Allan Poe. He was like, well, that's not possible. He's been dead for, very long time. He said, well, previously unpublished. Going to find out Poe is, he's kept here and he's still writing. And the whole reveal of Poe still being alive, it's one of the more creepier parts of the creepier moments of the whole movie. They do that very well. The way with the lighting, the slow reveal, very well done. I would definitely say it's the most well-acted segment. I mean, it is Peter Cushing and Jack Palance. So, and the fact that they're both Poe fans. So, that's already got me interested. It would have been kind of neat just because of the time this came out, since it's a Poe-centric story, and they wanted an American actor, I'm guessing, in that role, or at least in the film in general. If they got Vincent Price, but because of all the Poe films he was doing with Roger Corman at the time, but he was still under contract with American International, so even if he wanted to, he probably could have done it. But, I mean, it's fine enough with Jack Palance. It would have been even more amazing with Christopher Lee if that's the role he was supposed to have. But it really is great to see Jack Palance. And him and Cushing really trying to one-up each other with who's the bigger fan of Poe. It really is entertaining to watch. And then we get the final story, which again is incorporated into the wraparound, where this guy, played by Michael Ripper, goes crazy. Like, all this talk about fate and whatever, goes nuts, grabs the shears from Atropos, kills Dr. Diablo, and all the patrons flee in fear. And then when they all leave, Meredith kind of looks around, realizes it's all fake, and him and the patron kind of like shake hands, like, hey, we got him. Good show, really good show. But then they realize that Jack Palance is still in the room, and he sort of commends them on a great performance as well. And I think he leaves thinking, well, now I know the whole thing was staged, probably implying he's going to meet the same fate later. And then, like other Amicus films, when Burgess Meredith goes to put the shears back, he looks at the camera, breaks the fourth wall, and addresses the audience, and pretty much tells us that, he is the devil himself. Which isn't the first time Burgess Meredith has played the devil. He also played him in one of his 4 Twilight Zone episodes. So, has there ever been an actor that's played the devil, more like Satan himself, more than once, and 2 different, and more than one, like, unrelated, different things? He might be the only one, or one of the few. But he played Satan in a Twilight Zone episode, and he played him again here, and you can tell Meredith's really having fun with it. I mean, is he hamming it up? Probably a little bit. But this was 1967, so this was like season 2 into Batman. So he probably enjoyed playing a bit more of a darker, more sinister role than Penguin. But I'll also put Meredith in that category of actor, like Cushing, Lee, Price, Palance, where no matter Donald Pleasance, no matter how small the role, I mean, he has a big role in this, but he always gives 100%, and you can tell he's enjoying it. I would definitely say this is the most underrated of the Amicus anthology films. Yeah, even though House That Dripped Blood and Asylum may have stories or segments that I enjoy more than the ones in this one's definitely the most consistent with amount of good stories, or consistency in stories, and a wraparound. It's definitely a step up from Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. For a sophomore effort after that, like this was their second anthology, definitely a step up, and obviously way better than From Beyond the Grave. So the only other Amicus anthology I had to get to would be Vault of Horror. Then I hope to get to ones that get mixed in with Amicus, like the Uncanny and Tales That Witness Madness, and a couple other ones, hopefully before Halloween. But yeah. Oh, and there's no torture or garden in the whole film at all. And I guess when it hit American cinemas, there was a gimmick where patrons of the theater were given packets of torture garden seeds to go home and plant. Of course, they were just grass seeds, but just one of those things where the theaters used to do fun gimmicks. Which, gimmicks like that, or like barf bags at like Blood Feast, way better, more fun gimmick than, say, 3D that comes back every 30 years. But yeah, I had fun watching this. Definitely more of a Twilight Zone feel in these segments than, say, some of the later ones. It was great to have Freddie Francis direct this. He's definitely doing different things in each story. Just the piano story, Mr. Steinway, excuse me, definitely has more of like a Bava Italian feel. And I actually think this is some of Robert Bloch's better writing for anthology segments. But yeah, Torture Garden, 1967, very underrated gem, especially from Amicus. Thank you for watching.